Welcome to Your Success Podcast. We give you actionable insight and stories behind real-life success wherever you go.
Welcome to Your Success Podcast. I'm Angelos, and today the tables are being turned because my good friend Andrew White, who we had on a few weeks ago, mentioned to me after our interview, would you like to interview me?
Yeah, why not?
And so I'm really pleased to have you here today, Andrew.
Thank you for having me.
Welcome back.
Thanks.
You're a veteran now.
It's lovely to be back, yeah.
Cool. So I guess you've got some questions for me.
I do indeed.
And I'm here. I'm ready. Ask me anything.
Wicked. Well, thank you for having me. I suppose we'll kick things off with the first one is, if you could tell us a bit about how you led up to your first investment, from your upbringing straight up to your first investment.
Okay. I guess I'm living my mum's unrealized potential.
Fair enough. Okay.
With her entrepreneurship, because she's always been quite entrepreneurial. She wanted a restaurant. When she was younger, she always had these ideas. But sadly, my dad, he's very risk averse, and he didn't necessarily want that to happen. And obviously, she had to respect it and everything else. And I guess I've kind of been aware of that story when I was growing up, and I was aware that things weren't very plentiful in the money department. And my parents, no complaints, they did what they could. And when I was growing up, I was very aware that we were poor people, rich in love, the old cliche, but poor in wealth. And so as I was growing up, I realized this was a fact, and I didn't want it to happen to myself. So in my teenage years, I was determined to do something different rather than just get a standard job or get your A-levels, all that kind of stuff. So I just finished GCSEs at school, and I did all right. I'm not going to lie to you. I made a Batmobile go-kart for my DT project, which was pretty cool. I loved it, going up and down the colonnade. Did really good at drama, all the kind of arty stuff. Science, I didn't have the discipline to really get stuck into it. And going to do A-levels, and then I was offered a job in the National Bank of Greece in the City of London, and as an IT guy. And I thought, yeah, bloody right, I want to get out of this place. I want to go to London, be a big man, start making some monies. Yeah, definitely. So I was 16. I was offered the job, £15,000, which at the time I thought I was the richest guy around. 15,000 back in 2000 was a lot of money, especially when you didn't have any money or haven't come from any money at all. So I was buying DVDs every day, like 20 quid each. I bought a DVD player. I was so proud of it. I put it in my backpack. I took it all the way to my uncle's house just to show him the quality difference. And I guess I realized there was, this is how money is made. You work hard. You stick at it for a career, 30, 40 years, whatever it may be, get your pension, and then hopefully have a good time cruising around Greece or wherever at the time. Yeah. After a couple of years, I realized this wasn't really for me. I needed a formal education. So I went to university. I did a degree in computer systems and networking. I found it very frustrating because I just wanted to get out there and make money, but sometimes you have to take a step backwards before you can take a step forwards, right? You've got to have those special letters after your name in order to get those. It's like a key opening up certain positions. Because all I wanted to do is be an IT manager, if you can imagine the exciting life I had up to that. But I always saw the world of IT as a stepping stone to something else. I was always a very visual person. So seeing things on computer screens or servers, wherever it may be, it came very quickly and naturally to me, as opposed to the boring tech stuff. I just want to get out there and be practical and see it. Sure. Got my degree, got my job, and...
were you happy at that point?
I was pleased that I had graduated. I got a 2-1. I was 1% away from a first. Okay. I do think that they mark things on a bell curve. I'm not going to go into that right now. Anyway, so got my job. I was happy. I was like, yeah, okay, now's time. I think my beginning salary is like 25,000, whatever it was, which is not too bad for down in this part of the world. But you had to become a jack of all trades in the world of IT. You have to know a little bit about programming, networking, training people, understanding problems, resolving problems all the time, all sorts of weird, wonderful stuff.
So it's not as simple as turning it off and on again?
Well, it does work a lot of the time, I'm not going to lie to you. That is the industry secret. Anyway, so my mum said to me in the first, let's say, 6 months or whatever it was, a year, I was at the job, and she said to me, there's a 6-bedroom student house for sale. And I was like, okay, that's nice. Not really interested, but yeah, no, I really think you should go and see it, Angelos. I was like, yeah, but I'm going to be an IT manager, I want to be an IT director. Ooh,
that's the dream.
That's the dream, man. And she made me go and see it. It's the honest answer.
Okay.
Yeah, I had no intentions. My family were always, so my aunties and uncles, they were always into property, but it wasn't something I really had any interest in. And went to see it. I've always been into pushing yourself and challenges. So when I was offered that job when I was 16, I was like, yeah, let's go to London, move there by myself, be a man. And you grow up very quickly. And I thought, well, you know what, let's go for this. It stacks up, the numbers work. Let's do it. Let's push myself, let's learn new skills and all that kind of stuff. Little did I know back in that time, 13, 14 years ago now, it would become this monster, a good monster,
yes,
but an all-consuming monster. And it's changed my life in many, many different ways, for the better. Yeah. That's roughly the approximate story from school to my first investment.
Fair enough. So you're what I get from that is you're a real family-orientated guy that just wants to work hard and do well. Yeah,
absolutely. Hard work pays. You work smart, for sure, but you also have to put in a shed load of hard work. And I got that from my mum and dad. So my dad's 73 now, and he still walks to work every day. He won't retire because he understands, once you retire, unless you really have lots of hobbies, you tend to wind down very quickly.
You get bored.
And you get bored, and he doesn't want that. So he has more energy than people half his age. And my mum is still doing that kind of intense community work. So I don't think I'll be packing up for a very long time.
Fair enough. So I suppose that leads me on to a really good question is, what's your biggest factor that has helped you be successful?
I've always known, I know that sounds a bit strange, but I've always known I was going to do well no matter what I was going to turn my hand to, whether it's going to be acting or I think I wanted to be a Royal Marine officer when I was 16, or whatever I decided to do, I was going to be the best at it.
You had that mindset.
Yeah. From a very, very young age. I used to do acting in the Greek school. I had to learn, 14 odd pages of Greek and act and do all these cool little plays. And I thought, I'm going to do the best I can. I'm going to be the best, most committed actor, know my lines inside out. If you're going to do it, you do it properly. Yeah. And that's always been my philosophy on these things.
Fair enough. Okay. So again, that leads me to another really good question is, what are your success habits? What do you do that maybe no one else does that makes you successful?
I can't claim that I'm unique in anything that I do. All I know is that I write down every day what I've done, so good and bad, and what I appreciate and I'm grateful for. So I call it my Dear Diary. And every day I write down everything I do. Okay. And then for a couple of reasons. First of all, when I look back at the dramas a year ago or 2 years ago, I think, bloody hell, man, I was so worried at the time about that issue. And now look at it, it's just ancient history. So that puts things into perspective today. So if something really, doesn't go quite your way, you think, well, am I really going to be thinking about this in a year or 2 years' time? Probably not. Okay. Should I really be worried about it? Probably not. Am I going to resolve it? Most definitely. So let's just crack on. Let's skip the drama and get on with it. Sure. What else do I do? I think you have to have a shed load of determination and perseverance, and you have to be tenacious. Yeah. And sometimes, I don't advise this for everyone, but I guess my mindset is very much burn your boats, and this is the mission that I'm going to achieve. Yep. So you write down your objective, you have a time frame to it, give or take. And then you work backwards from there. What am I going to do? A year, 6 months, a month, next week, tomorrow, and you start from there. Yeah. And it will go in all sorts of weird and wonderful tangents. It will never be a straight line. Okay. But just knowing where you're going is very, very important. And not being blinkered, but being almost obsessed with achieving your goals and achieving the mission. Once you've achieved your mission, you reevaluate things. Where did it go right? Where did it go wrong? Next mission. And then that's how you consistently grow through your life and hit all these great goals. But it's a day-by-day process. Yeah.
So with that in mind then, if you take yourself back 5 years, where did you see yourself today?
5 years ago. Christ, I can't remember what I had for breakfast. That's going to be putting down in the Dear Diary, what did I have for breakfast today? 5 years ago, what would I have been? 31. So I was just, I had this plan to really grow the portfolio. Yep. I knew I had to improve my cash flow quite significantly, quite quickly, because I wanted to really push things along. I had these big ideas, big plans. Yeah. And so I was buying in leads at the time, which I think we're going to talk about a little bit later.
We might talk about that later,
about some interesting mistakes coming up.
Yes, yeah.
Just going back to your earlier question about, how has this happened? Yeah. And I think I need to really mention that the reasons this happened is, I'm the implementer of all of this, but the support network, whether it's friends, family, mentors, they're really important along the journey. Very, very important.
Along the way.
Yeah, people you meet along the way. Some will be good, some will be bad, some will be irrelevant. But you listen to everyone, and that's the important thing. You listen to everything, and then you filter what's important and relevant to yourself. So it's very important to have a good, strong support network behind you.
So two-part of that one. So we found out what you wanted to be today, 5 years ago. Where do you see yourself in 5 years?
Okay, so 5 years' time, I anticipate having 3 or 4 children. I need an electrician, I need a plumber, definitely need a plasterer.
Yeah.
Painters, very important, yes, indeed. I'm planning to, so I'll give you my year plan, and then I'll kind of predict what the 5 years, because if you told me 5 years ago that I'd be doing this, I was a #1 best-selling author, doing a podcast and all this other stuff, I would get out of town. Yeah. But I probably would have believed you, because that's the crazy stuff I kind of do. Yeah. So by the end of this year, my goals are for 2020 to release my second book and make it, again, a #1 bestseller, and really help people with their property side of things. So I've started writing that, but I'm so wrapped up in growing the portfolio at the moment. I'm looking to take it up to 100 plus units in the next year or so.
Where are you at now?
I'm about halfway there.
Okay.
I'm about halfway there. And I'm looking to bring on the first member of staff soon, because it's just reached a point where with the networking events, with the property, podcast, book.
I bet there are people at home are going, wow, you've done all of this on your own and no help at all.
It's hard work, and if you want it enough, you'll do it, or you make excuses.
Sure.
And the people that I mentor, the people in the Pig Mastermind, we sit down, and the people that do the best, I know this may sound really obvious, but the people that take action every single day, every single week, and just keep going, and we keep them accountable. The people that drop off, and they drop off very early, are the people that just don't do it. There's always a reason. There's always an excuse. Yeah. And sometimes it's a legitimate excuse, health reasons, whatever else, and you respect that. But you kind of very quickly pick out the people who... And all it means, I mean, we're not here to judge, but all it means is that their why is not strong enough. Yeah. My why is to make sure that I leave a great legacy behind for my family, to enjoy the life that I have today with my family, and to make sure that we live comfortably. And I can build my boat, which I'm really excited about. So write a book by the end of the year, really grow the networking group in Plymouth and in Truro, which is growing fantastically well, really pleased. Grow the team, so have my full-time PA, so I can start delegating some low-level tasks so I can concentrate on the overall picture. And I also have, looking beyond that, in the next 2 to 5 years, to continue growing the portfolio, and to provide really high quality housing across Plymouth. But also I have a series of 10 books that I want to write, the people that really made a difference in civilization, and focusing on each individual person, how do they really make a difference, what contributions did they make, and what could we learn from them, both positive and negative.
Okay. Is it top secret if I ask who the first book's going to be about?
Well, one of the most influential people, in my view, in bringing countries together. So Alexander the Great, I'm talking about. So this man here, at the age of 19, he inherited his father's army, his empire, Macedonia with Greece, and then he went to Persia and he burned his boats quite literally and told his guys, I think there's about 40,000 soldiers versus this massive Persian empire, hundreds of thousands of soldiers against them, and said, look guys, we've burnt our boats, there's no going back now, we've got to win or we're dead.
The only way is forward.
Exactly. And his military tactics are still taught in Sandhurst and in American military schools today because he was such a fantastic leader, strategist. He always led from the front. He achieved the impossible. A fantastic role model if you're looking for someone who can teach you leadership and perseverance and just having this overall vision and goal and inspiring men. So yeah, he's a really inspiring guy.
Wicked. Okay, this leads us on to Leeds, I reckon. Maybe.
Go on.
What mistakes have you made along the way to being successful?
So there's two things that I want to mention specifically because we make mistakes all the time. Yep. Sometimes they're big ones, sometimes they're very, very small, and you just improve. But the two things that really stand out for me was so I've bought and sold, I can't remember, 40 odd flips, and that's where you buy and sell and whatever else. And I was doing really well. And then I rushed. In 2016, I made a mistake. So that was mistake number one. The reason I rushed was because the government were going to increase the stamp duty for people's second homes and investors. So I thought, right, okay, let's get a deal under my belt quickly before that happens. I didn't have the foresight to realise that I wasn't the only one who's going to be doing that. And everyone else did that as well. So I beat the April deadline in 2016, did the refurb in record time, did a great job, lovely, beautiful house that it became again, and then put it on the market. Mistake number two was so I normally put it on with the same agent that I sell it with because they will naturally upsell it for you because they know how bad it was before. This agent was just atrocious in every way on the selling side of things, unfortunately. So they cocked up a lot of things. They put the old pictures where it was really stinky and rubbish against the new price, and so immediately you lose momentum, and people are like, well, there's no way that's going to worth that, Then there was this, I would say, a good 4, 5, 6 months, especially in Plymouth, where there was this lull, this vacuum, shall we say, of inactivity because everyone had rushed to beat the stamp duty deadline, and then it just lulled. And so in the end, I had to sell it at a loss, which knocked my confidence a bit. I'm not going to lie to you. It did. I mean, after a great run, to have this loss. So
was that your first loss?
Yes, my first loss and only loss so far. Hopefully forever.
That's a good score.
It is a good score, but at the time I didn't realise that. I didn't appreciate that. I was like, God damn it, man! I took it really personally. I spoke with my investor at the time. I kept him aware of everything that was going on well in advance. He knew everything almost in real time because it's very important to keep your investors up to date with what's going on. In the end, I paid up for the difference out of my own pocket because they will always get paid first before I do. Sure. But the lesson I learned here was to speak with others who are more experienced than you. So I spoke to a friend who lives in Portugal, a great guy called Lee, and I said to him, Lee, it's like been kicked in the balls.
Yep.
Okay, it's knocked the wind out of me a little bit. And he said to me, Angelos, look, yes, okay, 15,000 is not a small amount for sure, but he knows people who've lost hundreds of thousands of pounds on property deals, and they would love to have your 15k loss. Yeah. So just putting it into perspective, sometimes you need to speak with people who are more experienced than you, just to understand really it's not as bad as what you think it is. And after having that chat and thinking long and hard for a good week or two, I was like, right, let's get back on that horse, let's crack on. And that's mistake number one.
Yep.
So that's more of a mindset thing with a loss. And the second thing was my Leeds expedition. So, Angelos, why did you invest in Leeds? You're from Plymouth. And I was like, all right, I'll tell you, Andy. So, but at the time, I was looking at other student areas to invest in the country because I saw which way the market was going with the big boys moving in and then they push all the private landlords out. I saw it in Huddersfield, Exeter, Leeds, and it's happened well and truly in Plymouth as well. So I wanted to be ahead of that game slightly. So I travelled north because you hear of all these very cheap houses. You can buy a 4-bedroom house in certain postcodes in Leeds for like 60, 70, 80,000 pounds, and you think, bloody hell, man, that's a really good...
What a steal.
Yeah, indeed. So I met a letting agent up there who sources them and manages the refurb and then lets them out. So it's like the holy trinity, shall we say.
Yeah. Almost too good to be true.
Well, to be fair to them, they did a good job.
Okay.
I won't say anything bad about them, but the mistake I made was that I didn't do enough due diligence on the area. So I'm going to say the postcode, I don't care. So LS9 in Leeds, there are good parts and there are not so good parts. And unfortunately, because of my lack of local knowledge, and this is why, investing out of town works, don't get me wrong, but if you can, try and invest in your own home town because it makes much more sense. But I understand sometimes you can't, for example, if you're investing in London, you're not necessarily going to get really high yielding properties. You may get the capital growth, perhaps. So it does work for sure. But I would always prefer to invest local.
Sure.
But at the time, I had a pot of money and I wanted to buy 4 or 5 Leeds houses to take my cash flow up to, I don't know, was it £2,000-3,000 net a month, which was a considerable amount at the time. Mm-hmm. And it was working. For a good 2-3 years, it was working. The agent was doing a great job. But then the area started degrading slightly. And boilers were stolen on Christmas Eve. So I was in the mall with Thea, my wife, and I had this horrible phone call. But the problem is the reception in the mall is really crap, so all I heard was boiler, stolen. I was like, no!
It's not what you want to hear
just before Christmas, because you know what's coming. It's going to be an insurance claim or you're going to have to do it or whatever. Yeah. And apparently there's one of the guys living in the house, he tried to weigh it in along with the washing machine, but what he didn't realise that boilers have very little intrinsic metal value. They are built like crap, to be fair. So he couldn't weigh it in. The police were called, he was arrested, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. But then it started degrading very quickly after that. A lot of non-desirables moved into the area, shall we say, and there were lots of burglaries. It's very difficult to let your house when the house to the right and the house to the left are destroyed. Yeah, boarded up and destroyed. So changed letting agent, and this person who did a fantastic job, a guy called John Philbin, fantastic guy, with his assistant Patrick. Awesome job they did in a very difficult situation, but it got to the point where these are grown men, they're experienced, been doing it for 30 odd years, they've seen the good and the bad. They felt unsafe walking down the streets trying to let these properties. Sure. Even the kids were eyeing them up, if you know what I mean. And that's not the area that you really want to be in, if you know what I mean. Definitely not. No. And insurance, they would raise it as a red flag. It started getting noticed. So it's like, Christ, even the insurers are getting a bit worried on this one. So I thought it's time to make a strategic exit. Now, that in itself isn't necessarily the mistake, because I think that was a very good thing to do. Sure. But the mistake was how I did it. So I called it Operation Withdrawal. A tactical retreat.
I love the name. It's
you got to have, I call everything Operation this, Operation that. But it was a matter of getting out of there as soon as possible, releasing that capital and reinvesting closer to home in Plymouth, in the areas that I knew and loved and whatever else. The mistake I made was that I realised that I couldn't necessarily exit slowly. Leeds has got some licensing stuff coming up, or has happened, but at the time it was well and truly around the corner. Also, the area is getting worse and worse. Houses being broken into. I think my house got broken into and they were subletting it. So Patrick had to go in and chuck them all out. It's really bizarre how these things happen. And it got worse and worse. And people kept dumping rubbish in the garden, and then Leeds environmental people started having a go, and you just think, bloody hell, man. So I wanted to get rid of them. Problem is that if you go from, let's say, £2,000-3,000 a month, and then you evict all your tenants because you have to sell them because people want their own tenants, etc., then you take a massive hit on the cash flow. And this is why I timed it perhaps a little bit poorly. Sure. So put them all on the market and try to get rid of them as soon as possible. Two of them went really quickly. The other 2 really dragged. But the problem is that one of the properties in Plymouth suddenly went empty. Okay. And so you've got 5 properties which are not producing anything.
There, yeah.
So they've gone from being cash flowing assets to massive liabilities because you've got to pay the council tax, you've got to be aware of all the problems that are going up in the north. But then that's the first part of the problem. The second part of the problem is the fact that, yes, okay, you've released all your capital over the space of, let's say, it took 6 months. Okay. It's still going to take time to buy cash flowing assets to replace that lost income. So have you heard of the J curve at all?
I haven't, no.
No, so the letter J, if you imagine the letter J, it goes down, curves back up again. So most businesses, if they rely on some kind of capital injection, whatever else, they go into debt, shall we say, and then they start building up their sales and their customer base or properties or whatever it is, and then they start ticking up, and then they, hopefully, all being well, make a lot of profit and onwards and upwards. And at the time, it's just right down, because of 5 empty properties and whatever else. So, yeah, some lessons learned there for sure. You know, be more tactful with how many properties you put on the market at the same time. But at the time, I felt it was just getting to a point where I was waking up every day thinking, Christ, I'm just relieved that I haven't had that text message that my property's been blown up in Leeds and whatever else.
Down,
yeah. So, yeah, the Leeds expedition, it was a good learning curve for many reasons. Would I do it again? No, for sure. But I'm glad I did it because there was lots of learnings to be made out of it. But then that journey I mentioned earlier to success, where it has to be, we all want a straight line, but it's inevitably a very wavy, circular, all sorts of weird, wonderful shapes. If it hadn't been for Leeds, I wouldn't be focused on what I'm doing today, which is becoming quite successful in the world of buying blocks of flats. Yeah. And sometimes you have to, like I said, one step back to move 2 steps forward. Sure. So that's my learnings from Leeds.
Fair enough. 2 mistakes.
And hopefully anyone listening from LS9 won't be too offended with the fact that I've just slated some of those areas. But, Yeah.
Do
your due diligence, that's for sure.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Right. If you could start over again, what would you do differently? And I'm talking right back to the start. So you've just finished school. Mm-hmm. What would you do differently?
Okay, what would I do differently? I'll still go to London because that was a great experience working in the bank, working at Channel 4, some of their production companies. That was a fantastic experience in London. It made me grow up. I would probably have become a Royal Marine Reservist a lot earlier. I was a special constable. I would have definitely done that and probably done that a lot longer. Sure. But at the time, I had to make a choice between doing property, work, special constable, property networking events, all these kind of things, and they take a lot of time. So something had to drop, if you know what I mean. Yeah. I definitely wouldn't have gone to university. Okay. For that was 5 years of my life, not wasted because I learned a lot, but I felt like I was at the traffic lights. My foot was on the accelerator, the lights were green, and my handbrake was on. Okay. It's like, come on, man, let me go.
Get at it.
Yeah, and 5 years was a hell of a long time. I did a foundation year, and then I did a placement year, and all this kind of stuff. Fully qualified, great, but that's 5 years lost. I would have gone back and just started buying property from the age of whenever, as early as I could, to buy as much property as possible, because I would have realised that capital growth massively by now, 20 years later, but also it would have opened up many, many different avenues for me. I'd also have probably looked after my health a little bit more. I tend to find when you're working really hard, and especially when you're doing it all by yourself, something's got to give. And unfortunately, I used to be extremely fit. Yeah. I used to keep up with all my friends on their bikes because I didn't have a bike. I used to run. Yeah. But you just got to keep track of things and have a good balance in your life. Make sure that your health is always coming first, and then the wealth, because otherwise you spend a lot of wealth to try and replace the health, and sometimes your body doesn't necessarily want to do what you would like it to do. So it's always having a balance between the two.
Yeah, wicked. Oh wow, Carl, you've done so much. Like it's mad. So could you tell us about your most difficult investment? Would you say that was Leeds?
Yes.
Yeah?
Yeah, it was. But that was more of a difficult investment in the last, let's say, quarter of that life cycle.
Sure.
I think sometimes doing the refurbs can be really, really challenging. I'll give you an example. Okay. I bought a block of 4 flats last August. Mm-hmm. And at the time, me and the surveyor, we picked up, there were various damp issues. So we probably have to replace a few of the beams and put steels in to replace the rotten beams so the floors don't fall. Started excavating. just digging around and just seeing how bad were the timbers, and they were quite bad. So we put acro props up to make sure, as a safety thing, inform the insurer straight away, inform the lender straight away. Really important that you keep the key players aware of what's going on, because if you don't and it all goes to hell, trust me, if they haven't been informed and then suddenly you tell them after the fact, you could potentially put yourself into massive jeopardy there. So really important to always keep things open, honest, and communicate with all the key players. So then we started just exposing the lintels above the windows, which we knew were going to be rotten. So we thought, just put some steels in, or concrete lintels, whatever it is, to support things. It's only then did we realise that it was extremely bad. We've got this, I guess, 4.5-story building. The half story is like this triangular parapet on the top, whatever you call it. And it's resting on a single skin of brick.
Okay.
And, a single skin of brick, all that means is just one layer of brick.
Yeah.
Okay, it's an arch, for sure, and it's been there for 150 years, but it's not... You
don't want your house resting on that.
Not really, because maybe 1 story, maybe, but 4 and a bit.
Yeah.
I mean, imagine that weight all down on those things. So I was like, oh, crap. So then immediate phone calls to architects, surveyors, structural engineers, these kind of things. We had a structural engineer come in from Plymouth and from quite a renowned company. I won't mention it because I don't want to name and shame. But they came in, sent the guy round, and he just said, oh, crap, it's not a matter of if, it's when it falls. And he just literally reversed out the house, and we never heard of him again. Absolutely useless. Yep. So then we contacted this really cool guy, extra-tired university lecturer who specialised in structural engineering, really cool guy. And he came around and he said, yeah, you got a problem. It's not as bad as what you think it is, but obviously you've got to sort it out. So the solution was to put a 3 or 4-story steel beams going through each of the stories with a 12-inch reinforced concrete base to effectively act as a splinter to the single skin. So then you bolt through into the bricks, and then we welded these I-beams back into another I-beam, a cross-beam, halfway into the house. So there's no way that the front of the house would ever... Even if it decided it wanted to pull, it would have to drag the entire house with it for it to go. Sure. So building control over the moon, that we over-engineered this solution. And you can my tip to you is, when you come across these problems, you can only ever over-engineer it once. Sure. If you under-engineer it, then you're probably going to have to look at it again and again. Yeah. So hopefully that's going to be good for a few hundred years. But during those 3-4 weeks of that uncertainty where you're waiting for the drawings being let down by these structural engineers, it was... interesting times, man. Yeah. Interesting times for me and the builder. But having a great support team, my insurance broker was being kept. He visited on site to make sure that everything that we said was actually being implemented. So yeah, it was a real cross-team
it sounds like process. You had a really tough challenge. You absolutely nailed it.
Yeah, I mean, we had this Bulgarian ex-army tank welder doing all of the welding with his son Chico. And everyone kept asking him for the time, obviously. And it was just a really good team that we had 7-8 people, because it was 8 mil thick steel and it came from Wales, and it was just a really good little challenge. So yeah, lots of lessons to be learned. And sometimes you just got to think, this is what the property game throws at you, and you just got to, you can either break down or you can just rise to the challenge. And I was very pleased to have a great team that worked alongside me.
It sounds like you had a great team.
Yeah, I'm really pleased with the result.
Yeah. So if it all went wrong tomorrow, what would you do? What's the first step?
So I guess in what respect? Give me a scenario. Don't say coronavirus.
Let's say half the portfolio falls down. All of the houses just fall down. Okay,
well, that's an easy one, because then the insurance would kick in.
Okay.
And okay. So let's talk more catastrophic errors. Okay. Right. I'm thinking worst case scenario.
I'm pretty sure they don't insure against acts of God. Is that right?
Yeah, they do.
Do they?
So one of the questions I asked my broker, because I love throwing these random questions at him, what happens if there's a nuclear accident, because we live in Plymouth, we've got nuclear submarines. What happens? Are we insured? And he wasn't quite sure, so he rang up the insurer. Apparently the government insures you because it's their kind of responsibility. What happens if an asteroid hits us, provided that you survive? Apparently is that covered as an act of God. Okay. It's like, okay, cool. So that's easy. You can deal with that. I guess the most catastrophic thing for me would be not being around anymore.
Okay.
So let's say coronavirus takes me down. Damn you, coronavirus. But then it's literally, my descendants have to deal with everything. Sure. So you have to plan for the best and hope for the worst. So I've got life insurance, which covers any outstanding loans, et cetera, that I've got. There's a key plan in place. So if I get knocked out for whatever reason, then another individual who's been named will take over the running of the portfolio until everything is stabilized with the upcoming projects I'm talking about. And then it will be handed over to Thea, my wife, who will basically oversee the management and make sure that the lettings and everything is happening correctly as it should be. Yeah. So it's important to think worst case scenario and plan for it. Yeah. And worst case scenario is that you're no longer here anymore. Sure. What happens then? And then you've got to look at all the lenders and making sure that whoever inherits it is mortgageable, is able to take on that level of thing. Or they may decide they're going to sell half to pay off the other half. That's always, there's plenty of equity there. Yeah. So, and just making sure that your will is up to date. Because things change very quickly sometimes, especially when you expand quite quickly. You need to make sure that everyone is safeguarded because I guess what I'm trying to say is, I am the biggest strength, but also the biggest weakness of the business.
If you take you out of the situation, it will.
And then suddenly, if I didn't have these plans in place, then it could quite quickly unravel, which I never want to happen. So it's always making sure that you've got succession plans. Sure. It's really important.
The army say prior preparation prevents piss poor performance.
Yep, the old P's.
Yep,
you can't.
That's the one. Yeah, wishes. So you asked me this in our interview a couple of weeks ago, and it was, what does success look like to you?
Okay, so my book that I co-wrote with Mo, I wrote in there that success to me means doing what I want, when I want, how I want it. Basically freedom to a certain extent, right? Sure. And that, for me, it's waking up and going, you know what, if I want to write that book, I'm going to write that book. Yeah. And I don't need to ask permission. I'm just going to crack on with it. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to have fun with it and not feel bad about it. Or if I want to build that boat, or if I want to take my son out and we're going to have, go to the latest Star Trek convention, so be it. I don't need to ask permission off anyone and whatever else. But that's just, I'm relatively there, shall we say. There's a lot of things happening behind the scenes with lots of projects in the pipeline. But it's taken an incredible amount of work to kind of get to that point. There's always more, right? And I guess as an ambitious person, and I speak to a lot of successful people, being ambitious is both a blessing and a curse. Because, yes, you always want more. But as human beings, we all want more. But ambitious people want a lot more.
Yes.
You hit the goal. So I want to make 20k net a month. Okay, you hit that goal. Then what? You're going to stop? No, because you've built up so much momentum. Yeah. You've learned so many things, great challenges. Why not go for 40? Why not go to 60? I want the lovely new CLA Mercedes. Right, I got that now. Now what? Mm. So you hit these plateaus, but then you realize it's not the top of the mountain. There's another mile of mountain to go, and you keep pushing yourself. And that's how I see success. Always striving to better myself, but also to achieve a lot more as well in multiple different fields, whether it's book writing, podcasting, events, property, and whatever else I turn my hand to. Yeah. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, I'm a bit embarrassed about my answer now. No. This, sort of bringing things to a close a little bit. What I suppose we covered a little bit about what is next for you. What's the plan?
So I've got quite a few projects in the pipeline, which I'm starting the refurbs on very soon. I'm including the crown jewels in the portfolios, a block of 9 flats. Wow. It's a beautiful, beautiful building, which is absolutely run down right now. The local council have taken an interest in it because they want to see what I end up doing with it. And it will be hotel quality standard of living. Yeah. So it will become beautiful, beautiful flats. There's also an entrance lobby, 4 meters by 4 meters, beautiful checkered slate floor. amazing coving, and so we're going to put some motion-activated light sensors on the stairs. So as you go up, the lights go up, and then they go down when you leave. And just a really nice thing. So when people walk into that building, they don't think, oh yeah, here we go. Oh, which flat am I going? They think, yeah, I'm home. I want to live here.
Yeah.
And that's what I've done in that little pocket in the area that I invest in Plymouth. A lot of these properties were really run down. They had a lot of undesirable people there. Mm-hmm. And so just helping them move on and reintroducing working professional people to try and lift up the area a little bit. And that's what I feel great pride in. Yeah. I'm a very creative person, so I take great pride in turning rundown properties into beautiful little palaces. I mentioned about the book that I'm writing at the moment. The podcast is doing extremely well. Star Trek stuff is happening behind the scenes. I have a great passion for Star Trek, and I've got to really get on top of my fitness. That's if you have that little triangle, the wealth side of things is going really well. Yeah. The other stuff is going really well, but the health side of things, I need to just really push myself and get fighting fit again, which is going to be a good challenge over the next year.
I can help you with that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wicked. So, final question. Mm-hmm. What advice would you give the guys listening at home who might potentially want to invest in property or invest elsewhere? What advice would you give them?
I think the most important thing with investing in property or investing in stocks and shares or whatever it may be is just knowing where you're heading with it.
Sure.
Put your plan down on paper. Write down why are you doing this. Mm-hmm. Is it because you enjoy investing in property? Is it because you enjoy unblocking the toilets at 2 a.m. or whatever it may be? Because there will be some crappy days.
Yeah.
Or is it the side benefit of making some profit and using that profit to then go on holiday with your family or reinvest into your pension fund or whatever it may be? Yeah. Just work on the top level stuff, the why. Also, get educated. There are many different ways of making money in this world, and sometimes educating yourself with a respected person, company, whatever it may be, and make sure you do your due diligence on them. Doing that will help shortcut perhaps some of the mistakes that you will make along the way. And they may have spent tens of thousands of pounds rectifying their mistakes, and they can just tell you over a space of a day or a weekend, look, don't do this, don't invest in X, or don't do it this way, do it that way. So these kind of lessons, and get a mentor. Yeah. So I like mentors. I've worked with many over the years, and they really dive down deep into your personal things. So an education company, they will give you some strategies, but they won't necessarily focus completely on what Andrew wants or what Angelos wants, or whatever it may be. Sure. I find a mentor once a month. We sit down, keeps you accountable, helps steer you, overcome some problems. They're there when you need them. Yeah. And I find that's an invaluable service. So summarize, know your why. Yep. Really important. It's your compass, really. It's your northern star, making sure that you're always heading to the right direction. Get educated and find someone who will keep you accountable and someone who's going to help really improve you, and have some fun along the way. Really important. Yes, okay, we all want to get to the final destination where we're extremely wealthy and we're doing extremely well, but enjoy it.
Enjoy the journey.
Yeah, most definitely. Sometimes, I'm guilty of this. I'm so wrapped up in achieving the mission, you kind of blinker everything else out, whether that's friends or spending quality time or whatever. Yeah. It's making sure you have a balance there as well. It's very important.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much for your time.
That's all right. It's my pleasure.
I'll hand the podcast over to you.
Well, it's interesting having the tables turned, and perhaps we can do it in future where guests interview me and vice versa. So, thanks again, Andrew, for spending some time asking me questions, and we'd love to hear from you at home. Perhaps you can relate to some of the things that I've been talking about. Please get in touch at hello@yoursuccesspodcast.com or reach out on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn. We're everywhere. Yeah. Good chatting with you, Andrew. Really enjoyed it. I hope you did as well. And see you guys again on the next exciting episode of Your Success Podcast.
Thank you very much, guys.
You have been listening to Your Success Podcast. Click subscribe for more incredible content. More details can be found at www.yoursuccesspodcast.com.